Hi everyone, we're just going to let people filter through for a moment. So if you're wondering why I'm sitting here not saying anything, it's just while we let the connections happen. So we'll start in a few seconds. Okay, let's get started. I'd like to welcome you all to this webinar. It's a pretty exciting topic and seems to have generated quite a lot of interest. Certainly the registrations show that, but we know whenever we put content out about drones, it usually generates discussion. I'm Jackie, Head of Comms at iMove, and I'm going to moderate this webinar today. So just to get things started, I'd like to acknowledge the Bunurong people as traditional owners of the lands from which we're running this webinar here in Port Melbourne. And I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be joining us today. I'm aware that some of you may not be very familiar with iMove, so just quickly, we're a cooperative research centre. So what that means is we do research with our partners. We're funded by the federal government for a 10-year period and by our partners to improve transport in Australia. And when we say transport, we mean literally anything to do with transport. So at this point in time, we have around 191 projects that are either running or have been completed. And if any of our staff are on here today, they will be noting that probably the number's gone up since I last looked, because that's it has a tendency to do that. We are in the process at the moment. We have some capacity to work with new partners and get different projects off the ground. So if the way that we operate and our style of research is appealing to you, or you'd like to talk to us about co-investing in research, then feel free to get in touch with us. Just visit the website imoveaustralia.com. So coming back to this particular webinar and the drone topic, for the webinar, I'd like to give you a bit of housekeeping. I'm sure it'll generate some questions. We've already had some come through. Please use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen to send through your questions. You can do that at any time, doesn't have to wait till the end. So if something occurs to you, just pop it in the Q&A and we'll get round to having a look at that at the end. It will be recorded. We'll have a recording available on our website in the next couple of days. So what are we going to do today? We're going to get a brief introduction from the sponsor of this project, which is the Department of Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Development, Communications and the Arts. And that will be a contextual introduction to why the project looking at drones in Australia and the future for drones was done. And then we'll hear about the research from our research team. So in order to take this webinar on, I'd like to introduce Benedict Lyons, Director, National Emerging Aviation Technologies Policy at the Department of Infrastructure. I won't say the full title again. Benedict, welcome. And if you'd like to join us to give us the context for the project, that would be great.
Thank you, Jackie. So look, first, I just wanted to start with a few thank yous to Miriam, Vij, Alan and the University of South Australian Victorian University project teams for putting together this project. It's been a really comprehensive body of work. And also to the iMove team, including Renee and Jackie, for coordinating the whole project and arranging this webinar, which is a really great opportunity to share some of the findings of this and views on the increasing uptake of drones in Australia. Why we commissioned this report? So our department and my team is responsible for developing and coordinating a whole of government approach to management of the emerging aviation technologies sector. We work across many Commonwealth agencies as well as with state and territory governments, trying to look at what the policy setting should be and develop and dealing with a whole range of issues to with the key goal of trying to get the most benefits out of these technologies for the Australian economy and the Australian community, whilst also ensuring we have effective approaches to manage the impacts and the potential downsides and risks associated with these technologies as well. So we commissioned this report to really try to test and deepen our understanding of the market and how the sector is developing, and to build on some research we'd previously commissioned in 2020, which similarly took a look at a bit of an economic snapshot and some projections for the sector. This report is really excellent. It sort of provides a real wealth of insights, some more in-depth review, attitudinal surveys, targeted expert interviews, and some deeper modelling of some of the key use cases. I'll leave it to the team to present their findings, but I think, just wanted to underline how really important this sort of work is to informing our policy development and our engagement on these topics in this, this really fast-growing and fast-moving sector. I think from our perspective, some of the key things, understanding how the market's developing, where some of those really big opportunities lie, as well as sort of some of the big risks and challenges, is really critical to help us prioritise and focus our efforts, both for ourselves as well as some of the other government agencies that we work with closely. And I think as well, one of the things we're really looking to do is trying to have open and accessible information for a much wider range of stakeholders as well. And I know that this sort of the sort of insights and findings of this report is really valuable to industry, as well as state and territory governments and a whole range of other stakeholders, just to help them calibrate their thinking and their responses, and so that we can all sort of work together to support the growth of the sector. So I thought with that sort of context, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming today, and hand over back to Jackie to the team to discuss the research.
Thanks, Benedict. That's really great, and we're pleased that the government's being proactive in how to take the drone industry forward. I'm not the expert on this though, so I'm really excited to bring a couple of experts to present to you today about the research that we've done. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Miriam Wiedemann, who is the Adjunct Research Fellow for the Centre of Enterprise Dynamics in Global Economies. That's a bit of a mouthful, Miriam, at the UniSA Business. And she's also a lecturer and researcher at the University of New South Wales at the School of Aviation. Joining Miriam will be Dr. Akshay Vij, who is Associate Professor at UniSA Business. So I'd like to invite both of you to share with us the findings of the study, and be available for a Q&A afterwards. And I believe Benedict will be hanging around to answer all of your questions. Over to you, Miriam and Vij.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Jackie. So I would like to start to say, even the title says validating the benefits of increased drone uptake. We didn't look only at the benefits, but we also clearly looked at challenges, opportunities, and potential risks. And I know that that is quite of interest for some people in the audience, because there was some concerns when we started the study that we would only look at the benefits. I also would like to say that we don't claim to be completely exhaustive. It is a very emerging topic, and it is rapidly developing. So we were also quite surprised when we looked at the study how much is actually already happening, not only in Australia, but all over the world. So what will I talk about today? So a bit about the project background. We heard already from Benedict about that, who was the research team, the methodology we applied. Drones in Australia, where are we right now from what we are knowing? Benefits to industry, different geographies, sectors, and Australia as a whole. How does the public see drones? What are the risks? And I really would like to stress the risk as well that need to be managed. What could be a potential role of government to help or support the uptake of drones, but also managing the risks, and some general benefits, opportunities for Australia. So we heard already how that project came to life. So it came to us through a call from iMove to all iMove partners, so the department, with a very clear brief. The project was done in a very short time period of a bit more than 8 months. We had a very multidisciplinary team, and I think that was very beneficial that we had people from different disciplines like aviation, transport, innovation, economy, quite of us also having an engineering background. We worked across 2 different universities, across different academic units. And I think what's also very important to stress is that we were not a team that was per se pro-drone. So we had actually much more skeptical team members than people who were cheering for drones when we started. So we really had a blank canvas when we started, a very open mind, and a very, very clear intention to look at it holistically. So what did we do in the short period of 8 months with different sub-teams? We had a very expensive literature review. We conducted a survey of 1,000 Australian residents and asked them about their concerns about drones in neighborhoods, but also what they're thinking about drones in general, how supportive they are, what are their attitudes towards different modes of transports when it comes to advanced air mobility, for example, so using drones as a transport option in the future, the willingness to work in this emerging sector, and how they are seeing the impact on different industry sectors and how supportive they would be for using more drones for different industries. The qualitative part of the study looked at experts, so different group of participants. We conducted some interviews and surveys with them, and the experts were coming from industry, peak bodies, academia, drone operators, and some representatives of the existing trials we are having at the moment in Australia ongoing. So we try to find out what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats when it comes to drones, and also understanding where's the level of agreement across these experts when it comes to different questions around drones and their strengths, their opportunities, and where the risks are maybe are. A third project team, we're looking at the economic wider impact of drones with a CG model from Victoria University. And they estimated the GDP impact from different sectors on their use of drone. And I think Glenn will probably say something about that a little bit later, but of course, this is an economic model, so it had a lot of uncertainty and a lot of assumptions. So I'm a little bit later present a few numbers that were coming out of this study, but we would also like to stress that it is very early days and there's a lot of uncertainty around the technology. So where are we with drones in Australia? It is a bit of a mixed picture. So we tried in this image here to show where's the technology for different sectors when it comes to drones, and what is the market doing, how much are we using it, and what is the potential market share in Australia for different sectors. So the market share here in this picture is coming out of the earlier study from Deloitte, and the rest is coming out of the literature review. So we are seeing here that, for example, construction has huge market potential, but is at the moment not as widely used in Australia as it would be possible. Even the technology is pretty ready for that sector. We are also seeing that the technology is there for recreation and entertainment, for example, agriculture, mining and resources. Maybe by now everyone has seen one of these drone swarms when we have cultural festivals, very often now used instead of fireworks, and very widely used already in Australia. The picture for public service is a bit mixed, somewhere in the middle, a bit more potential there. And we see that AAM, advanced air mobility, for example, what is drones for transport of passenger and cargo, so much bigger drones than the little drone you're seeing maybe your neighbor is using, is pretty much in its infancy in Australia, and there is a bit of potential to grow. We tried to do a bit of an international comparison, and that was, I think, a bit more challenging than we thought, because there's so much happening. And I think we were all very surprised how much is already happening and popping up all over the world, not only in Australia. But from the literature, what we have seen, we think Australia is doing pretty okay in international comparison. So we saw some that it looks like Australia is leading in sectors, for example, like agriculture, pretty much similar to other countries when it comes to freight and last mile delivery, public sector services, mining, environmental management, and media, recreation, and entertainment, but is clearly lagging in sectors such as construction and AAM, where we probably have quite a bit of space to grow in Australia. In general, what are the benefits for industry to use drones? If you're out there and you maybe ask yourself, why should I use a drone? Well, what we found is that it's often cheaper to use a drone. There are new business opportunities coming out of using drones. It is often faster. It is very easy to use. You get drones today out of the box with software and everything included. It is often safer, and it could be environmentally friendlier than other methods. So for example, when you try to inspect a roof of a house, skyscraper or something that's really difficult to access, and it can be really easy to send a drone up there, getting into corners where maybe it's difficult to get in, where it's dangerous for human beings to get. So all in these cases, a drone can be very useful. When it comes to how good are drones for the environment, I will stress it a few times during the presentation. We found that we don't really know enough, that we really need to have more research to do, for example, life cycle analysis to really see if the overall use of drones is good for the environment. When you think about production of drones, the batteries, where is the energy coming from, etc., etc. Benefits for Australia. What we see at the moment for short to medium term is that the highest benefits are in regional and remote Australia. And I say short to medium term because for the capital cities, we're having some air traffic management challenges to solve first before we can drones using more in highly populated areas, in areas where we have quite a bit of air traffic, where we are very close to existing airports. So at the moment we see it's much easier to use in regional and remote Australia. And the benefits are quite high for two different reasons. So one where we can clearly see for transport options. So if you imagine you are in a regional town or a remote community, and a drone could quickly bring you in some goods, or even in the future transport people to the next regional town, or even then once we have solved the air traffic management issues, to a capital city. So that could be quite a game changer for regional and remote Australia in terms of connectivity and access to services, access to goods, and also when you think about emergency services, transfer of blood, medical equipment, transport of doctors also, or even transporting patients from, for example, remote Australia to the next regional hospital. Looking at different sectors, the results are very mixed in terms of benefits. So what I said earlier, I put a few numbers in here because I found everyone is asking me for these numbers. And I know Glyn, who is on the call, will say you need to be careful with these numbers because it comes from economic modeling. There are a lot of assumptions at the moment. There are a lot of unknowns when it comes to drone technology. But for example, they found that we are using, if the benefits could be for public services, the GDP could grow by 0.02% or 460 million Australian dollar. When you look at the table to the right, you are seeing you get a bit more information when it comes to the different sectors. And you see that the different columns show at the moment, the relative level of adoption, the potential direct benefit to industry, and then the broader macroeconomic benefits. So that is more on an Australian level. And then the last column shows what is the public thinking about? How supportive is the public to use drones in these different sectors? And you can see it's a very mixed picture, and very clearly seen that the public is very happy to support drones where they see very high benefits for society, like emergency relief. They think it's okay to support in general in industries like agriculture and mining and construction. At the moment, they are a bit more hesitant when it comes to flying cars, or what are flying taxis, or whatever we want to call it, but drones for passenger transport or bigger cargo drones. And in general, recreation and entertainment is accepted, but they wouldn't see that needs a lot of support. We see a few areas where we put an unclear in, and that's mainly around the environment management again. Again, it wasn't quite clear from our findings where the benefits are, how big the benefits could be, what are the broader economic benefits, and really looking also at the negative impact on the environment, maybe from the drones themselves. So as I said earlier, we asked the public as well, what are you thinking about drones? So in general, we found that 63% are supportive of drones. And I think, at least if you ask me, I was quite surprised how many of Australian residents were actually also saying they had experience with drone, they are owning a drone, they know what a drone is. And yeah, 63% quite supportive of drones. Interestingly, when we ask them, what are you concerned about when it comes to drones? Then that's a picture on the right. They were saying clearly invasion of privacy. That is a major, major concern. As you can see, the numbers quite high here. And surprisingly, the numbers for noise pollution on the very bottom, what we didn't expect at all, because usually in the history of drones, noise was always a major thing. Nevertheless, we are still seeing here more than 35% of people said noise pollution they are worried about. And then the second most concern, disturbance to wildlife, and that was coming back to environment management, using drones for environment management, but also understanding what could be the impact, for example, on the environment from using drones. How is wildlife maybe disturbed by the noise, by something buzzing, flying around? We don't know enough about it at the moment from what we found. When it comes to different sectors, to the left, asking the public, what do you think, where should drones or the usage of drones being supported? Then very clearly you see here more than 90% of people ask, so quite a big number, saying for emergency services and disaster recovery. So flying, for example, goods out there to flooded communities, rescuing people from the bush. We are all supportive of that. And maybe not surprisingly, the lowest support for recreation and entertainment, probably more like they're not against it, but in general, not seen as important as expected. Risks. So as I said in the beginning, we didn't not looked only at benefits, but we also clearly looked at risks for more drone uptake. So there are some substantial risks that need to be managed if we are using more drones. We're having already quite a few drones flying around, and was said much more than we would have expected, but it's nothing in comparison to if drones are really taking off on a bigger scale. So privacy, as said before, quite a concern from residents, so needs to be managed accordingly. Safety and security, so two things. For example, what if a drone is crashing? Doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. So in terms of, does it hit someone on the ground? Security, it's a flying object. You know that you can do with flying objects, you can reach areas where it's maybe not so easy to be stopped. And we had incidents, for example, in the United States, where a drone was flying close to the White House and wasn't detected because it was seen to be as a bird. Noise in brackets here, because it has been in the last years in drone research and interaction with community always been a big topic, but it seems to become less of a topic, and probably that's the reason why the reason is the technology is getting better. Drones are getting less noisy and less annoying buzzing than they have been in the past. Environmental impacts, again, really want to stress that one. We don't know enough. We really need to look more into the big picture before we claim it as all environmental friendly, and really need to find out how environmental friendly it is, but also understanding the impact on wildlife, for example, from more drone usage. And then one last point, really in terms of national interests, data, making sure that the data that is collected from drones that are coming out of the box with a software integrated, that we understand where that data that is collected is going to, who has access to it, and maybe considering a real Australian supply chain and making sure that all of the data stays inside of the country. We looked at what could government do, or where do we see the role of government? And we found that to get that balance right between the positives, such as using drones for cost savings, time savings, easier to use, or what we say the benefits for industry, and the negatives or potential negatives in terms of invasion of privacy, impact on wildlife, noise pollution, and also possible displacement of existing jobs as they are maybe replaced by drones, that the government has a role to play there. And there could be 4 major interventions or support coming from the government. The first one, quite obvious, regulations, and that's obviously something that's already being worked on. For regulations, there's to stress that there was some concern coming from industry in terms of over-regulation, but also in terms of that drones are used for different sectors, and that we need to considering that they are usually dealing with 2 different sets of regulation. One is for the drone per se as a flying object, and the other one is a regulation for the sector they are using the drone. So if you are a drone operator who is offering your services for different sectors, you are dealing with regulations for different sectors, plus a regulation for the drone, plus very often that these can be differ for different sectors in different states. Possible investment from the government, especially for the sectors or drone users where we found high support, especially for public services. That seems to be a good area where that is highly supported by the public, and there's a bit of room to grow there. Also for sectors, for example, AAM and freight and last mile delivery for regional and remote Australia, it looks if there's a bit of room to push the Australian initiative forward. Another interesting finding was that a lot of people we talked to said in their experience with trials or using drones, that it was a lot about public education. And I think that's something also that's what we experience inside of the team, that once you understand the benefits, that you are much more supportive of the use of drones. And for example, using a drone for shark patrol on the beach, when people have known that this is a drone flying around to looking for sharks, people had no problems with that and were quite supportive. While if they hadn't got that information, they were quite wary about what that drone is flying over there, maybe considering that someone maybe would take pictures of them or something like that. So one way around could be that we are color coding drones, so that it's, for example, if you have a red drone flying above you, you know that is emergency or public services. But also making sure that the public really understands where the possible benefits are for drones. And then really managing the potential negative impact of drones as well, as I said before, understanding the impact on the environment, the impact on privacy, safety, security, and noise. So where are opportunities for Australia? So we put that one big picture in here, what we call the determinants of drone uptake. And you see there are quite a few factors in there. So we have the technology, and we also have still a few challenges there. Looking at different use cases, and we had to limit it here at the use cases I said before: agriculture, freight and last mile delivery, construction, public services, mining, environmental management, advanced air mobility, and recreation and entertainment. Say that is not an exhaustive list. There are other use cases for drones we didn't have the opportunity to look at in detail, but there's for sure room to look at other use cases as well. Looking at the current trials that are happening and learning from them will for sure inform as well the future uptake of drones in this country. Looking at socioeconomic factors like productivity, employment, displacement of jobs, but also creating of new jobs, protection of culture and heritage, and the environment and sustainability. Value proposition to industry, as I said before, that's quite a long list and can be very beneficial for different industry and sectors. But nevertheless, there are also some challenges when it comes to the uptake for industry. For example, we have a shortage of remote pilots at the moment. So you're not allowed to fly just your drone without a license for industry purposes. So you need to have these drone pilots in place. And there's for sure quite some room, especially for maybe disadvantaged communities, to getting into that sector and really benefiting from it. There are also some transition costs for some industries. You need to get the technology on board. You need to educate the drone pilots. You need to understand the technology and the software around, etc. And there are other challenges, as said before, in terms of regulation, data, security, safety. How much is the public supporting it? Also, we found that they are seem to be quite supportive at the moment. So taking all of that into account, and that's quite a bit, we have a potential for GDP growth by really pushing drones for different sectors, and not all sectors are equal. We can use it for better integration and accessibility for regional or remote areas. And for me, that's for sure that's the biggest benefit right now, that considering the vast distances we have in Australia, that drones can be really quite useful there. And we have opportunities to build supply chain and manufacturing and really the whole ecosystem around drones in Australia. And the last thing we found, what's quite interesting, is that a lot of experts were saying Australia is actually an ideal test bed for emerging technology, because we have the space, but we have the talent in the country. We have the space to use or trial and test things safely, but we also have enough medium to big cities where we then can use it and test it in different environments. So overall, quite interesting, and but a lot of more to do. If you want to have a look at the final report, we have written up a whole section about future research and what more needs to be done. And I think, like always with new technology and new opportunities, are also coming a lot of more questions and a lot of challenges to be solved. But that shouldn't stop us to really make use of the technology for the benefits of all. So with that, I would like to finish with a big thank you to the whole research team and all partners involved that made it really easy to manage that whole project, and invite the team to join the panel now. Thank you.
And we are getting quite a few questions coming through. So if people would like to join the panel, I might just get you to stop sharing your screen, Miriam, as well. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, so thanks for all the questions that have been coming through. I think we certainly have a winner on the number of questions. Krish, you noted you're very enthusiastic with your questions, buddy. So we'll have a look at those shortly. I'd just like to kick off, though, because we've got Glyn, who's appeared on the panel here, and Miriam made some reference earlier to the economic impact of drones. Glyn, it seems like you're the designated expert in this area. And we have got a question coming through about how that impact was calculated. So I thought I would open up for you to say a little bit about your element of the study.
Okay, there's two main elements to this. Firstly, how big is the industry that is the centre of attention of drone usage, and what is the scope for use of drones within that industry? And then what sort of judgment can one make about cost savings? So we had a very nice presentation. I think Miriam was away, but Vij was sort of in charge at that point, from the emergency services people, which gave us an idea of how both the scope and maybe even the potential cost savings associated with the wider use of drones in emergency services. It's no surprise to me that it's by far on the basis of a survey that's been done, the most widely accepted of the uses of drones among all the possible uses. Now, what I had to do there was find out how big the emergency services sector was in the economy, and make a judgment about what might be the gains from that. And I had done a study on bushfire impacts early on, and I took a hypothetical whereby drones could, in a hypothetical world in which drones played a major role in identifying and locating bushfires before they got big, as in the Gosper Hills fire in Sydney 3 years ago, that one could infer that there'd be substantial social benefits being able to do something about that. So that was something we had a fair bit of information. Others, even though we were speculating as to what drones might do, we had a reasonable basis. Some of the other possibilities are rather more speculative when we're talking about mobility and so on. There, we need to find out a lot more to get really confident about what cost savings might be. And it's like any new technology. Are you going to use it, or are you going to keep taking the train or the plane or whatever to get from A to B? And that's the kind of thing that goes into needs to go into any economic, any inputs we have into an economic model. So when Miriam talked about the uncertainty, I think my emphasis in modelling is the uncertainty of the inputs that go in. plus the scope of what we're looking at. So I don't know if it answers the question, but we don't know, we're speculating, and all we can do is try to make realistic judgments on the basis of the data in front of us and the scope of where drones are being used at present and where they may be used in the future.
It's emerging area. There's a lot of unknowns, and things will evolve. So it's not a perfect science at this stage, but we just do the best we can with the data in front of us. Because there's so many questions coming through, I would like to throw open your microphone, Tammy. You've been asked to, you want to ask a question, so please go ahead.
Sorry, I probably pressed the button by error. So, but it's very interesting. I found it really good, and I noticed the stats, and I noticed the acceptance of drones has actually gone up over time since the last survey was done. So it's really good to hear that.
On the question of acceptance of drones, we did have a question come through just asking about, this is from Adam Welsh, a little bit more about the methodology and how do you, in terms of the acceptance, is there more acceptance within certain communities or areas, or did you break it down at that kind of level?
I can take that quickly. Yeah, we did look at how public acceptance might vary across demographic and geographic subpopulations. Definitely, we were interested in looking at how it might vary between regional and metropolitan communities, given that the use cases are likely to be different and the value proposition is potentially greater for remote and regional parts that aren't as well connected. Interestingly, actually, we didn't find any statistically significant differences in terms of what use cases were most appealing to different subpopulations. By and large, the same use cases received the same level of support across both regional and metropolitan, similar issues for different demographic groups as well.
A little bit more about the methodology also from Adam. While we're talking about methodology, how did you determine which sectors were the more advanced in Australia? He comments that the findings from this study don't seem to match with the manufacturer's sales by sector.
Raj, do you want to take that one, or should I answer it as it comes from the literature view mainly?
Yeah, I guess there are a couple of points from there. So one is, of course, the literature. We did the review and found that which sectors are at par or leading at the moment, based on both used cases as well as current trials going on. The second one, of course, part is the industry experts. I would say, we went to and tried to understand from different parts of the industry, how they are perceiving the risk and opportunity and threat, and accordingly where the efficiency is higher, and that's also dictates the part of our findings as well. Miriam, if you want to add anything.
No, I think it's also to acknowledge that the sectors are mainly coming from when we looked at previous studies who had determined what are the most promising sectors for Australia right now. But what I said earlier, it's not an exhaustive list, and there's for sure room for other studies to look at a whole bunch of other use cases as well.
Yeah, and at the same time, the cost and benefits are coming based on industry estimates, and then looking into the current trials and seeing that how much it's being used as well. So together, it's kind of a broad overview of where there are more opportunities than others. And then the CGs, of course, is more about the macroeconomic point of view from each sectoral point. So to some extent, this is like a three-dimensional studies coming into one place.
Fantastic. Thanks, Raj. Thanks, Miriam. Krish, I'm going to attempt to amalgamate all your questions into one. It looks like you're asking about the potential for logistics drones in Australia and for a little bit of information about the rules around that, and also how far we've got with in terms of the maximum payloads and distances that they can do. Now, I think this might be perhaps a little bit nitty-gritty for the purposes of this study, but I'm going to throw it open to the team anyway, because we have some excellent expertise here, and see if anyone can answer those questions. Miriam, would you like to make any comments?
Just looking here at a whole bunch of questions, trying to find the essence.
I mean, I think where are the logistics, you know, where are the major opportunities within logistics with drones? And, you know, what are the technology kind of limitations that we have at this point in time might be a good way of summarizing this.
Yeah, I think there are two things. If you look at the whole study, what's nearly 300 pages, there's a bit more detail into it. And there are two tables in it. One is a summary of drone trials in Australia, and then the other one are the projects that are funded under the Emerging Aviation Technology Partnerships Program. So I think that gives a good idea of also where Australia is and what trials are already happening. What I said earlier, in terms of cargo or logistics, I think we are seeing the highest benefit for regional and remote Australia for that reason, that we can transport like blood or goods by drones nowadays, and quite far distances. But when you talk to different manufacturers, the range is huge, right? In terms of how far they can go with one battery. There are different options also in terms of logistics. We have seen models of where the drone is using the roof of a truck, for example, to get out there and then leaves the truck for the last bit of the journey and deliver stuff, because the battery life is not going very far at the moment, right? But interesting question here also in terms of payload, and that was one recommendation of our study, that we call it a drone nowadays. Everything from the 250-gram drone, your neighbor is flying around happily taking some pictures, and up to 150-kilo drones with payload and everything. We call it still a drone. One recommendation was that we maybe need to make a distinction there, these different drones, but we have quite big drones and drones with quite a bit of payload nowadays as well.
Thanks, Mary. Just to move on to some more of the questions that are coming through, I'm seeing a little bit of a theme here around, we've talked a bit about the attitudes of humans to drones, but in terms of the impact, or one of the negative impacts that will need to be managed, although I'm not sure it needs to be managed, because I think wildlife is actually winning as far as drones are concerned from their perspective. But is that really a barrier in Australia? Are we seeing that as a problem with drones and the technology's ability to sort of integrate seamlessly with the environment around it and not disrupt the inhabitants? I think we've got the example here of bees coming out top. Thanks.
I think there are two things. One of the first things you're learning when you get your drone license is, what if a bird attacks you? What are you doing? And I can tell you it's quite scary actually when your drone is being attacked. So there are ways to do that. You basically run up very fast, faster than the bird. But, you know, as funny as it sounds, there is some interaction with wildlife. Maybe not so much as I would have expected when I was out there with drones, seeing us flying out with drones, and lots of birds out there, and a lot of them seem to be very unimpressed with what we are doing. But say then we have these bird attacks, so apparently they do react to it from time to time. And I think that's a big thing. We do not really understand when they react or why they react, and sometimes not. So there is maybe an element in all of that we haven't quite understood that. I don't know if it's the noise, the size of the drone, just in terms of where they are in the yearly cycle, you know. So I think there are really a lot of questions we need to look at.
And something I'll add to that is also the issue of scale for both human and wildlife acceptance is, right now you just have a handful of drones being tested in the sky. So the issues are very different, but the ultimate objective is for some of these deployments to get to mass scale. And when you have potentially hundreds of drones competing with each other and air traffic and wildlife, etc., some of these concerns that were less salient in our survey, like noise and just the visual eyesore that they are, will I think become a lot more salient. And similarly, the disturbance to wildlife will probably also become a much bigger issue.
Above my head in my rural camping experience last summer, so yeah, it's a problem. I've got a really interesting question come through from Anthony Perrington here. It's about sustainability of drones. So firstly, you touched, Miriam, on sustainability at the beginning, and we need to do more work to understand the life cycle and how sustainable is it really a sustainable option, and what's the contribution there. But so in terms of powering drones, this question is around, have we looked at the adoption and increasing use of gaseous and liquid hydrogen powered drones? Where things are changing, things are evolving, including in how we power them. So would you be able to comment on that?
Very briefly, first of all, an invitation to just come over after this webinar and have a chat, as we seem to be on the same campus. But also saying, yes, there is quite a bit happening around hydrogen and drones, and it seems to be quite promising, but we didn't look in detail at the technology in this study.
Point about the acceptance. We've had a few questions come through, and something that's fresh on my mind because we've recently released an iMove study on workforce and future workforce and digitalization in transport. In terms of loss of jobs, or in terms of new jobs that are being created, it's a transformation, and things come and go. Did you get more of a sense on how that will affect the workforce, and where the opportunities might be with drones in the future, and whether people are open to those opportunities?
Vish, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I'll be brief because the survey only really looked at it at a very high level. I mean, in terms of concerns from a public standpoint as to job displacement, etc., was somewhere in the middle. Neither the most important nor the least important concern at this point. But again, part of that is likely due to the technology still being very much in the early stages of development. And so there hasn't been as much disruption. So there's likely lack of public awareness of the potential long-term implications that drone technology might have. Outside of that, I think the qual work looked at more workforce training and some of that, Miriam, I'm not sure.
And take on notice and see if there's more information. For those that are interested in the workforce side of things, please feel free to visit our website and see the workforce report as well. Because we're all about transport at iMove, I've had a question come through. It probably is going to be the last one because we'll be wrapping up shortly, but how can drones improve road transport outcomes in Australia? Loving this one. Are there any interactions with cooperative intelligent transport systems, or can drones assist with congestion and road traffic management? Ooh.
I would say, I would assume so, but that's not something we looked at in this study. Vish or Ali, did you look at any of that in any of your other studies?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it. Nothing specifically comes to mind.
But I mean, what we have is drones, right? Is that third eye or that extra eye in the sky. So there could be for sure some opportunities to integrate it.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be actually, one of the things that does come to mind is one of the councils we spoke with, they're using drones to do surveys of tree cover within their council. And they're also looking at potentially using it for parking enforcement and things like that. So you are definitely starting to see some of those transport and land use applications. But honestly, I mean, I know are anecdotes, haven't really done a comprehensive scan.
Thanks, Vij. Thanks, Miriam. I think it's probably time to wrap up the webinar. I'd just like to thank everybody for the participation. It's certainly a topic that gets everyone talking. There's a few things I'd like to mention from here. iMove is constantly running webinars and other events for people, so please feel free to join our mailing list on at iMoveAustralia.com to hear about future events. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're also in the processes of looking at working with new partners, in particular partners who are involved in the transport industry, who are looking for co-investment and support for research projects. We've got opportunities to work with people at this point in time. It's a fairly limited window of opportunity because iMove is has a finite period of time as an organization. So please get in touch with us if you're interested in talking about that. The next webinar will be in June. We are going to be releasing the findings from a study in New South Wales on using hydrogen. So I think there's a couple of people in the audience that might be interested in that. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming today to this webinar. It was a really great attendance. I know we didn't get around to all of the questions, and I apologize for that. If there's anything really juicy in there, we'll have a little look post-event and see if we can put something up on our website to respond to any of the further questions. Thanks to all our speakers, panelists, and everyone that was involved in running this today. It's been really fantastic, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you very much, Jackie.